welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a word you hear all the time in Canada, reconciliation. But what does it actually mean? Understanding it is so important for building a better, more inclusive future for everyone. So let's get into it and break it down.
So, this is really the question at the heart of it all, isn't it? What is reconciliation, and why is everyone talking about it right now? Well, the answer isn't just about looking back at a history textbook. It's really about seeing how that history is still very much alive in our present and what it's asking from all of us as we look to the future.
And you can't really get what reconciliation is all about unless you first understand why it's even necessary. And that means we have to start by looking at a really painful and shared part of our history.
Okay, so this whole story really starts back in the late 1800s. That's when the Canadian government created the residential school system with the explicit goal of assimilating Indigenous children. Fast forward quite a bit to 2008. That's when the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, or the TRC, was formed to officially document the history and the devastating impacts of those schools. Then came 2015, and this was a huge moment. The TRC released its final report along with 94 calls to action, which really laid out a roadmap for how we could even begin to heal.
And make no mistake, that legacy is something that continues to impact Indigenous communities to this very day. This is not something that's just locked away in the past. We're talking about a living legacy of trauma that carries across generations, affecting everything from health and well-being to opportunities right here, right now. Honestly, just acknowledging that painful truth is the absolute first step you have to take on this path.
All right, so we have that painful history as our why. So now let's get into the what. What do we actually mean when we use that word reconciliation? What is this journey of healing all about?
At its very core, reconciliation is a process. It's a journey, not some single event or a finish line you cross. It's all about healing the relationship between Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples in Canada. And that means you have to do two things at the same time. You have to look backward and fully acknowledge the injustices of the past, while also looking forward with a genuine, heartfelt commitment to repair what was so badly broken. Now, to make that big idea a little more concrete, we can break it down into 4 key principles that guide the whole thing. First up is acknowledgement. That's that foundational step we talked about, really seeing what happened. Second is respect. This means truly valuing the incredibly diverse cultures, traditions, and rights of Indigenous peoples. Third, we have education, which is all about making sure we're an informed society, that we all learn our shared history. And fourth is collaboration, the idea that we have to do this work together, in real partnerships to get anywhere. So we've got the why, the history. We've got the what, the definition, which of course brings us to the most practical question of all, the how. How do we actually take these ideas and put them into practice?
Well, the biggest answer to how is found in those 94 calls to action from the TRC. You should think of it less like a report collecting dust on a shelf and more like a detailed instruction manual. It gives us a really concrete roadmap with specific, actionable steps for literally everyone, from the federal government all the way down to communities and each one of us as individuals. And when you look at what these calls cover, the sheer scope is just massive. We're talking about everything from reforming the education and justice systems to child welfare, health and wellness, and preserving languages and cultures. It just goes to show you how deep the legacy of colonization really goes. This isn't some side issue. It literally touches every part of Canadian society.
And this work, it has to happen on 2 different levels at the same time. You've got government action. That's the top-down stuff, like changing policies and laws based on the calls to action. But just as important is the community action. That's the bottom-up work. We're talking about grassroots movements, local art projects, and cultural events that build real person-to-person relationships. You need both. Which brings us to what might be the most important point of all, reconciliation. It isn't someone else's job to do. It's a journey for every single one of us. At the end of the day, reconciliation is a shared responsibility. I love that part of the quote. It's an invitation. It's an open invitation for every person in this country to be part of the solution. It doesn't matter how big or how small your part is. Learning, listening, acting. It's about building a future together where every single voice is finally heard and respected.
So as we wrap this up, the real question isn't just what is reconciliation? It really becomes what is my role in it? Whether that's reading a book, listening to a survivor's story, or getting involved in your community, everyone has a part to play. This is a shared journey. So the question to leave you with is, what role will you play?